You sit there waiting for a sign, waiting for a miracle. You keep asking God when? When will things change? But let me tell you something, this isn't about when, this is about who. The problem is, we're so obsessed with breakthrough that we forget the one who breaks through. We want blessing, but do we want the blesser? We crave favor, but do we fear the Lord? Because let me tell you, God will not pour out favor on a vessel that is not yielded. You want a shift? You want God to turn things around? Then hear me, He doesn't shift your situation before He shifts your soul. He doesn't change the environment around you before He transforms the heart within you. You want a new season? Then die to the old one. You want open doors? Then stop kicking them down in your own strength. The sign you're looking for is not in the sky, it's not in your bank account, it's not in your followers, your fame, or your feelings. It's in your knees hitting the floor and your voice crying out, "Not my will, but yours be done." The sign that God is about to shift everything in your favor is that He's first breaking you. He's stripping away your idols. He's dismantling your pride. He's ruining your comfort so He can rebuild your character. You think He's against you because it's hard right now, but I'm telling you, this is His favor. Because He loves you too much to leave you unchanged. He loves you too much to let you prosper with a poisoned heart. He will wreck your plans before He allows you to succeed without Him. So the shift you're waiting for, don't expect it to look like the world's idea of favor. It won't always come with applause. It might come with isolation. It might come with tears. But if it comes from Him, then it's for your good. And if it's for your good, then it's for His glory. And if it's for His glory, then you can rest assured it's worth it. Don't you see? The shift isn't just what's about to happen to you. It's what He's already doing in you. He's shifting your dependence. He's shifting your desires. He's shifting your identity from orphan to son, from sinner to saint, from self-made to God-kept. That's the favor. That's the miracle. That's the sign. And it was never about your comfort. It was about His calling. So stop asking when and start asking what. Not when will God move, but what is God doing right now in me? Because the greatest shift doesn't come when your circumstances change. It comes when your eyes open to who He is. Holy, sovereign, good, and He does not lie. If He promised it, He will perform it. If He began it, He will finish it. God shifts your soul before He shifts your situation. We often get caught up in the waiting game. We look at our struggles, our situations, and our unanswered prayers, wondering why God hasn't done anything to change them. But the truth is, God's primary concern is not our circumstances, it's our hearts. God is far more interested in transforming who we are on the inside than in fixing everything around us. If we don't allow Him to change our inner world, we will miss the blessing of His true purpose in our lives, even when our external circumstances finally change. The foundation of any true breakthrough begins with a shift in our hearts. The Bible is full of examples where God allowed people to endure hardship before bringing about breakthrough, and these hardships were not punishment, they were preparation. God doesn't deliver us from hardship simply to make us comfortable. He allows us to go through difficult seasons because He's working something deeper than we can see in the natural. He's shaping us, refining us, purging the impurities of our character, and molding us into vessels fit for His use. If we're not willing to undergo that process, then we miss the very blessing we seek. Take the example of Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a dream of greatness, but Joseph's life didn't immediately reflect that dream. Instead, he was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. His situation seemed like the very opposite of what God had promised. But God didn't send Joseph through these trials to destroy him. He used those years in the pit, the prison, and the trials as a training ground to prepare him for the palace. God had to deal with Joseph's pride, teach him humility, and deepen his trust in God's faithfulness. Only after those years of hardship was Joseph ready to step into the fulfillment of the dream God had given him. We look at Joseph's story and think, why didn't God just give him the dream's fulfillment right away? The answer is simple. Joseph's heart wasn't ready. He needed to learn to trust God fully, even in the worst of circumstances. His character had to be molded in such a way that when he did receive power and authority, he would use it to glorify God and serve others, not to lord it over them. This is a hard truth to swallow. We want instant gratification. We want the quick fix, the miracle that changes everything overnight. But God works differently. He often allows us to go through seasons of struggle, hardship, and waiting because He's doing something in us that will outlast the momentary discomfort. God knows that if He just gave us everything we want when we want it, we wouldn't be prepared to handle the responsibility, the blessing, or the calling He has for us. We also need to understand that the shift that God is making in us is not always a comfortable one. He doesn't just tweak our attitudes or gently nudge us in the right direction. He often breaks us down so he can build us up stronger. Just as a potter shapes the clay by pressing, molding, and sometimes even breaking it, God shapes our lives through pressure and struggle. When the potter works with the clay, he has to apply consistent pressure, sometimes applying more than we can bear, in order to create a beautiful vessel. The clay doesn't have the power to control the potter's hands, and neither do we. In the same way, God has to be allowed to do the work he sees fit. If we resist the pressure, the shifting, the molding, we risk remaining in a state of immaturity, unfit for what God desires to do in and through our lives. But the good news is that even in the midst of this uncomfortable process, God is at work, and his work is always for our good. He is refining us, purging us, and drawing us closer to him. As we yield to him, the situation we're waiting to shift becomes secondary to the transformation that's happening inside us. God is less concerned about what we have or don't have and more concerned about who we're becoming. The truth is, if we don't allow God to shift us internally, we'll never be ready for the external shift that we've been praying for. Our hearts need to be aligned with his will before he can trust us with the blessings and responsibilities he wants to pour out. God's desire is for us to be conformed into the image of his Son. That is the ultimate transformation he desires for us. He's not just preparing us for breakthrough or success, he's preparing us for eternity. Every trial, every hardship, every moment of waiting is an opportunity to grow closer to him, to trust him more fully, and to learn how to walk by faith instead of by sight. When our souls are aligned with God's purpose, then and only then will we be able to handle the shifts that God brings in our lives. The change that we are desperately waiting for, the breakthrough, the favor we pray for, is often just a byproduct of the deeper, internal shift God is making in our heart. So stop focusing on the external change. Start asking God to change you. Let him shift your heart, your desires, and your will, and trust that when he has done that, the external changes will follow in due time. When your heart is aligned with God's, the shift you've been waiting for will come in the way he knows is best for you. And in that moment, you'll look back and realize that the true blessing wasn't just the breakthrough, was the work he did in you along the way. The favor of God doesn't always look like worldly success. We often measure success by external achievements, wealth, status, recognition, and material gain. When we face challenges or periods of struggle, we tend to question God's favor because we have been conditioned to believe that favor equals comfort and visible success. But God's favor doesn't always come with a shiny bow of worldly prosperity. Sometimes it's wrapped in pain, trials, and setbacks. The favor of God isn't about what's visible or what others can see on the outside. It's about the internal work he's doing in our lives to align us with his will, to refine our character, and to prepare us for the destiny he has for us. The Apostle Paul, one of the greatest servants of God, understood this truth all too well. He endured suffering, imprisonment, beatings, and rejection for the sake of the gospel. Yet through it all, he was able to say with confidence that he counted it all joy because he understood that God's favor was not in the external circumstances but in the transformation that was happening within him. Paul's success in God's eyes wasn't measured by his outward comfort or by how much he accomplished in terms of worldly standards. His success was defined by his faithfulness, his perseverance, and his willingness to endure hardship for the sake of the gospel. God's favor is often misunderstood as mere blessing in the traditional sense. In our minds, blessing is the accumulation of wealth, good health, a happy family, and a life free of difficulty. However, God's blessings transcend these things. He blesses us by giving us the strength to endure trials, the wisdom to navigate difficult situations, and the peace to withstand storms. His favor often shows up when we are most vulnerable, when we feel like we are losing everything, and when the world around us is falling apart. In those moments, his favor is revealed not through relief, but through his presence and his ability to sustain us in the midst of the struggle. Consider Job, whose life was a complete reversal of worldly success. He had wealth, family, and health, and in a moment, it all came crashing down. Yet in the midst of his profound suffering, he declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." Job recognized that even in the midst of unimaginable pain, God was still good, and God's favor was still present. He didn't see the external circumstances as a measure of God's approval or disapproval. He saw his trust in God as the true measure of his favor. God allowed Job's life to be shaken, not because he was punishing him, but because he was refining him and drawing him closer to himself. God's favor is not about avoiding hardship, it's about his presence in the hardship. It's about knowing that no matter what we go through, he is with us. The world may not understand this kind of favor because it doesn't align with the world's definition of success. But for the believer, God's favor is found in the assurance that His plans are always for our good and His glory, even when we can't see the outcome. We may not always get what we want or what we think we need, but in the process of walking through difficult seasons, we are being shaped into the image of Christ. That is the true blessing. It's important to note that God's favor doesn't always come with immediate rewards or visible results. Sometimes, His favor comes in the form of patience, endurance, and a deeper reliance on His strength. When we're in the midst of hardship, we might cry out for deliverance, but sometimes the deliverance comes in the form of inner peace, spiritual growth, and a deeper connection with God. It's easy to overlook these internal shifts, but these are the marks of God's favor. While the world may see someone who is struggling and think that they are cursed, the person who is relying on God in the midst of the struggle is actually walking in the favor of the Lord because they are learning to trust Him in ways they never could in times of ease. When we begin to understand that God's favor isn't about outward success, we can start to view our circumstances through a different lens. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" or "What did I do wrong?" we begin to ask, "What is God teaching me through this?" When we shift our focus from worldly measures of success to spiritual growth, we can begin to appreciate the true favor of God in our lives. The blessings that come with His favor are not always things we can touch or see, but they are the deeper, eternal rewards that shape our character and prepare us for the work He has called us to do. God's favor may not look like worldly success, but it is far more valuable. It's the kind of favor that lasts beyond this life, shaping us into the people He has designed us to be. The favor of God is not always visible in terms of worldly wealth or recognition. It's found in His presence, His peace, His strength, and His faithfulness. When we understand this, we can walk through life with a sense of peace, knowing that no matter what happens externally, we are walking in His favor as long as we are faithful to Him and obedient to His will. God's favor is truly seen when we are able to maintain our faith, our peace, and our joy even in the midst of hardship. When we begin to see life through the lens of His love and purpose, we realize that His favor is more about what He's doing in us than what He's doing for us. It's in the difficult moments that we learn the most about His character and His love for us. It's in the moments of suffering that we grow closest to Him, and that is the greatest blessing of all. Spiritual growth often requires surrender and breaking. It is natural for us to resist the idea of breaking, especially when we are in the midst of suffering, loss, or hardship. We prefer peace, comfort, and ease. We long for situations to improve quickly, for circumstances to change, and for God to intervene in ways that feel tangible and immediate. But the truth is, God often uses these very challenges to refine us and mold us into the people He has created us to be. Growth rarely happens in seasons of ease, it occurs in the seasons of struggle. It's in the moments where we feel weakest, most vulnerable, and most desperate that God begins His transformative work in us. To grow spiritually, we must first recognize that there are parts of us that need to be broken down. We are born with sinful, selfish tendencies. We have ego, pride, and desires that are contrary to God's will. When we come to Christ, He doesn't just add something to our lives, He transforms our lives entirely. This transformation often requires a breaking of our will, our self-sufficiency, and our old ways of thinking and living. This isn't always comfortable, but it is necessary. God cannot fill us with His Spirit and His purposes if we are full of ourselves. He needs to empty us of our self-reliance, our pride, and our attachments to the things of this world before He can fill us with the fullness of His power, His purpose, and His peace. Think of a seed. A seed by nature is small and confined within its shell, but in order for that seed to grow into something fruitful, it must first be broken. The outer shell must crack and fall away, allowing the inner life to burst forth and grow. In the same way, we must be willing to be broken. We must allow God to strip away the things that keep us from becoming who He has designed us to be. The breaking may come through trials, perhaps a financial struggle, a broken relationship, a period of deep loss, or even a personal failure. It may not feel like a blessing in the moment, but the purpose of the breaking is always to make us more like Christ. This process of surrender and breaking isn't just a one-time event, it's a continual journey. As we grow spiritually, God will reveal areas in our hearts that need to be surrendered to Him. There will always be something in us that He is working on, shaping and refining. But with each step, we become more dependent on Him and less reliant on our own strength. It's in the breaking that we come to understand that we are nothing without Him. It's in the surrender that we realize that He is our source, our sustainer, and our Savior. The more we surrender, the more we are able to experience His presence, His peace, and His power in ways we never could have imagined. We often try to avoid or resist the breaking process, thinking that if we just hold on or fight through the pain, we will come out stronger. While it's true that we can learn valuable lessons through hardship, the real strength comes when we surrender our will to God. Strength in the kingdom of God is not found in self-reliance, but in complete dependence on Him. When we break and surrender, we allow God to show Himself as the true source of strength. When we admit our weakness, we make room for His strength to be made perfect in us. The Apostle Paul said, "But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." 2 Corinthians 12:9. In God's kingdom, weakness is not a curse, it's a place where His power can be most clearly seen. The more we allow ourselves to be broken and surrendered, the more His power will be evident in our lives. God is not looking for people who have it all together. He is looking for those who are willing to be broken, those who are willing to surrender their plans and desires to Him, and those who are willing to trust that He will use their brokenness for His glory. When we allow God to break us, we give Him the freedom to shape us into His image. And it is in that brokenness that we find the true strength that comes from Him alone. The process of surrender and breaking is not easy, but it is always worth it. Each time we surrender, we grow in our relationship with God. Each time we allow God to break us, we experience more of His love and grace. And each time we trust Him in our weakness, we discover the power of His resurrection working in us. As we grow spiritually, we learn to embrace the breaking, knowing that it is through these moments of surrender that we are truly transformed into the people God has called us to be. Everything that God allows in our lives, even the painful moments, is part of His plan to shape us. There is no wasted experience when we surrender to Him. Every trial, every broken moment is an opportunity for growth, for transformation, and for a deeper reliance on God. He is not in the business of breaking us to harm us. He is in the business of breaking us to make us whole in Him. When we surrender and allow God to do His work in us, we begin to see the world differently. We understand that His ways are higher than ours, and His plans are always for our good. Through the breaking, we find healing. Through the surrender, we find freedom. And through it all, we find that God's grace is sufficient. In every moment of breaking, surrender, and pain, we are being prepared for something greater. God's work in us is never finished. As we submit to Him and allow Him to continue His transforming work, we become more like the person He has always intended for us to be. It's a continual process, one that may not always be easy or comfortable, but one that will always lead to His glory and our ultimate good. There is a deep, transformative beauty in the breaking process. It's in that place of surrender that we find the greatest intimacy with God, the deepest understanding of His love, and the truest experience of His power. And in the end, it is in the breaking that we discover the fullness of His favor, the favor that comes not from external success, but from a life fully surrendered to Him. God's favor is not about avoiding hardship. This is a difficult concept to grasp, especially in a culture that often equates blessings with ease and prosperity. We live in a world that celebrates the outward signs of success, wealth, comfort, and status, and we assume that these are the tangible markers of God's favor. We pray for a smooth path, asking God to remove obstacles and bring us into seasons of peace. While there is nothing wrong with seeking God's help in our struggles, we must understand that His favor is not always about delivering us from difficulty. In fact, His favor often manifests in ways that are far deeper than the external relief we might crave. If we take a closer look at the lives of many of the people in the Bible who were called by God, we see that they experienced immense hardship, yet they walked in God's favor. Take, for example, the life of the Apostle Paul. He faced imprisonment, beatings, rejection, and persecution, yet he continually proclaimed that he was walking in God's favor. Paul understood that God's favor doesn't always come with an easy life, but with a life full of purpose, peace, and His presence even in the midst of suffering. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul shares that God's power is made perfect in weakness. His hardships, rather than being signs of God's displeasure, were seen as opportunities for God's strength to shine through. God's favor in this sense is not about avoiding pain, but about experiencing His sustaining grace in the midst of it. It's about knowing that even in the most difficult moments, God is present and at work. It's in the storms of life that we often draw closest to God, not because He removes the storm, but because He provides the strength to endure it. This is the favor that God offers us, the ability to rise above our circumstances and to see His hand at work, even when the situation seems dire. God doesn't promise that we won't face trials, but He does promise that He will be with us through them. For example, consider the story of Daniel in the Old Testament. He was thrown into the lion's den because of his unwavering faith in God. Yet even in the midst of this terrifying trial, God's favor was evident. He wasn't spared from the danger, but God shut the mouths of the lions and Daniel emerged unharmed. The favor of God didn't prevent the hardship, but it provided the protection and deliverance in the midst of it. This example illustrates that God's favor is not about avoiding trials, it's about experiencing His presence, His protection, and His strength through those trials. Similarly, when we go through difficult times in our own lives, we can take comfort in knowing that God's favor is not measured by our external circumstances. His favor is seen in how He sustains us, strengthens us, and equips us to endure. His favor is revealed in the peace that transcends understanding, even when everything around us is falling apart. His favor is evident in the resilience He gives us to keep moving forward, trusting that He is using every circumstance for our growth in His glory. When we align ourselves with God's purposes, we begin to see that hardship is not an indication of God's disfavor, but an opportunity for us to grow in faith and to become more dependent on Him. It's in the midst of hardship that we often learn the most about God's character, His faithfulness, His goodness, and His sufficiency. And it's in those moments that we experience a deeper level of favor, the kind that doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on the internal transformation that God is working within us. God's favor often shows up when we are most vulnerable, when we feel like we are losing everything, and when the world around us is falling apart. It's easy to assume that when life is hard, God is distant, or that He's withholding His favor from us. But in reality, it is often in our most vulnerable moments that we experience God's favor most powerfully. His favor doesn't always come in the form of immediate relief or the removal of pain, but in the form of His presence, His peace, and His provision in the midst of hardship. Think of the story of the 3 Hebrew boys Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were thrown into the fiery furnace because they refused to worship the king's image. The fire was real, it was hot, it was certain death, yet in the midst of the flames they were not alone. God's favor showed up not by preventing them from being thrown into the fire, but by walking with them through the fire. They came out of the furnace unharmed, their faith strengthened, and their testimony shining brightly. God's favor was evident, not in their escape from the fire, but in His presence with them in the fire. The same principle applies to us. In the most difficult seasons of life, God's favor doesn't always mean that He will take away our pain, but it means that He will be with us in it, carrying us through it, and using it for His purposes. His favor is revealed when we are able to stand firm in our faith, when we are able to worship Him in the midst of hardship, and when we experience His peace even in the darkest moments. God's favor is also evident in the way He sustains us during our trials. There is a supernatural strength that comes from God in times of difficulty. It's the strength to keep going when we feel like giving up. It's the courage to stand firm when everything around us seems to be crumbling. It's the wisdom to make the right decisions when we are surrounded by confusion. This is the favor of God, His ability to equip us for whatever we face and to strengthen us in the midst of it. When we understand that God's favor is not about avoiding hardship, but about experiencing His presence and strength in the midst of it, we begin to see our trials differently. Rather than seeing them as signs of God's disfavor, we can see them as opportunities to experience His favor in new and profound ways. God's favor is not about a life free from pain, it's about His presence with us in every situation, His strength sustaining us, and His purpose being accomplished through it all. We can walk through life with the confidence that, no matter what we face, God's favor is with us, equipping us, sustaining us, and transforming us from the inside out. When God begins to shift everything in your favor, it is essential to understand that His timing is not our timing. We live in a world of instant gratification where everything seems to happen in an instant. Whether it's through technology, transportation, or even social media, we have come to expect things to happen quickly. We want solutions to our problems, breakthroughs in our lives, and answers to our prayers right now. However, God's ways are higher than ours, and His timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our immediate desires. His favor does not operate within the limits of our human understanding. In the Bible, we see many examples of individuals who had to wait on God's timing, even when they were facing incredible struggles. Think of Abraham, who was promised by God that he would be the father of many nations, yet he had to wait 25 years before seeing the fulfillment of that promise. There were times in Abraham's life when it must have seemed as though the promise was delayed, but God's timing was always perfect. During those years of waiting, Abraham's faith was tested, refined, and deepened. His character was shaped, and he learned to trust God fully. This process of waiting allowed Abraham to receive God's blessing in a way that would not have been possible if everything had happened according to his own timeline. We can find similar stories throughout Scripture. David was anointed to be king while he was still a young shepherd boy, but he didn't immediately step into the throne. Instead, he spent years on the run from King Saul, hiding in caves and facing numerous trials. David could have questioned God's plan, wondering why he was anointed but not yet appointed to the position of king. Yet, in those years of waiting, David's relationship with God deepened. He learned to rely on God for protection, provision, and wisdom. God was preparing him not only for kingship but for the challenges that would come with it. If David had stepped into the role of king too soon, he might not have been ready for the responsibility. The delays were not denials, they were divine preparations for the favor that God was about to pour out on him. There are times in our own lives when it feels as though God's promises are delayed, or that we are stuck in a season of waiting. It's easy to become frustrated and anxious when things don't seem to be moving forward. However, we must remember that God is not bound by time the way we are. He sees the big picture, and He knows exactly when the right moment will come for everything to fall into place. Our waiting is not wasted. It is in these seasons that God is working behind the scenes, setting things up, aligning circumstances, and positioning us for the blessings that are to come. When God shifts everything in your favor, it will be at the perfect moment, when your heart, your character, and your circumstances are all in alignment with His will. Another aspect of God shifting everything in your favor is the transformation that happens within you during the waiting period. We often focus on the external circumstances that need to change, but God is more concerned with the internal transformation. Before He changes your external situation, He must first work in your heart, your mind, and your spirit. This transformation is crucial because if we are not spiritually prepared for the favor God is about to release, we may not be able to handle it when it arrives. God's favor is not just about giving us what we want or what we think we need. It is about preparing us to carry the weight of the blessing He is about to give us. If we are not emotionally and spiritually mature, the favor that we receive could lead to pride, self-reliance, or a lack of gratitude. God's favor is designed to draw us closer to Him and to help us fulfill the purpose He has for our lives. Therefore, the waiting period is a time of personal growth, humility, and deepening trust. God allows us to experience challenges, setbacks, and even failures so that we can learn valuable lessons about His character and His faithfulness. As we go through these trials, we begin to develop perseverance, patience, and a stronger reliance on God's provision. The waiting period also teaches us to align our desires with God's will. Sometimes we may think we know what is best for our lives, but God knows the perfect plan for us. His favor is not about giving us what we want in the moment, but about preparing us for what He has already planned. In the waiting, we learn to surrender our own desires and trust that God's plan is far greater than anything we could imagine. His favor is not about our comfort, it is about fulfilling His purpose in and through us. When we align our desires with His, we will be able to experience the fullness of His favor in a way that truly brings glory to His name. Another important aspect of God shifting everything in your favor is the realization that God's favor often comes through unexpected sources. We tend to think of favor as something that comes from people we know or from situations we can control. We may expect that the people who are in positions of power or influence will be the ones to bless us or open doors for us. However, God's favor often shows up in unexpected ways. He can use people we've never met, situations we didn't foresee, and even our enemies to bring about His purposes. God is not limited by our expectations or our understanding of how things should unfold. In the story of Joseph, for example, God's favor came through his time in prison and his relationship with the Pharaoh's cupbearer. Joseph had been wrongfully imprisoned, yet it was through this seemingly hopeless situation that he eventually found favor with Pharaoh. God used the most unlikely person, a prisoner, to bring about His plan for Joseph's life. Joseph's rise to power was not due to his own efforts or the favor of his family, but because of God's divine favor. This story serves as a reminder that God's favor can come from the most unexpected places, and we must be open to receiving it from His hand, no matter the source. God's favor also brings with it a responsibility to steward it well. When God shifts everything in your favor, it is not for you to become complacent or self-centered. It is for you to use the favor you receive to serve others, to build His kingdom, and to glorify Him. Favor is not a license to become prideful or to take credit for the blessings in our lives. Instead, it is a call to humility, gratitude, and service. We are blessed to be a blessing to others. As God pours out His favor on us, we are called to pour that favor out into the lives of those around us, to lift others up, and to use our position of influence to make a positive impact in the world. In conclusion, when God shifts everything in your favor, it is not just about external circumstances changing, it is about the transformation that occurs within you, the unexpected sources of favor, and the responsibility to steward that favor well. As you wait for God to bring about His plan, trust that He is working behind the scenes, preparing you and aligning everything for the right moment. God's timing is perfect, and His favor is not just about comfort, it is about fulfilling His purpose in your life. As you surrender to His will, allow Him to work in you and through you, and trust that He will bring about the shift in your life that will ultimately bring glory to Him. In conclusion, when God is about to shift everything in your favor, it is not just about the outward changes you may desire, it's about the inward transformation that is taking place. His favor doesn't always show up in ways we expect, nor does it come at the time we think is best. But we can be sure that God's timing is always perfect, and His favor is always for a purpose. It's in the waiting, the breaking, and the refining that we become ready to carry the blessings He has prepared for us. Remember, God's favor is not just about material things or external successes, it's about His presence, His peace, and His power in the midst of our trials. It's about being shaped and molded into the person He's always intended us to be. As we grow in faith, patience, and surrender, we learn to trust that He is always working for our good, even when we don't see it. So as you stand on the brink of the shift God is bringing into your life, keep your heart open, your faith strong, and your eyes fixed on Him. Embrace the process, trust in His timing, and know that the favor that is coming will be more than you could have ever imagined. With God on your side, everything is about to change for the better, and you will see His goodness and glory revealed in ways that will transform your life forever.